So welcome to our November edition of Industry Insiders through the Alumni Engagement Office at TCNJ. My name is Pam Persichetti, and I am the Alumni Engagement Officer at the college. A couple housekeeping items. We will have a Q&A at the conclusion of the webinar, at the conclusion of the presentation. So please feel free to enter questions in the chat or the Q&A feature, and I will be sure to moderate them at the conclusion of Tammy's presentation. So if anything comes to you, you do not have to hold it to the end. Please feel free to enter it. And I will jump right into introducing our speaker today. I'm very excited to have with us Tammy Tibbetts. She is class of 2007 from the School of Business. She is also a wonderful and valued member of our Board of Trustees. She is the co-founder and CEO of She's the First, a nonprofit to empower and educate girls across the world. If any of you had joined a few moments ago, she shared a video with us from the organization, and she will also share more on that organization in her presentation. And recently we can add author to your list of accomplishments as she just launched and released her book, Impact, that she co-authored, I believe, earlier this week. And the launch party was Tuesday, I believe. So congratulations, we're really excited for you for that, and all the best. And so that book, Impact, is about seeing and being a part of social change that you want to see in the world, which leads us right into the presentation today, how to do something that matters. Tammy is going to share with us some advice and some insight on how to see that social change that you would like to make in the world, and how she did it for herself. So I know you all want to hear from her, as do I, so I will turn it over to Tammy now. Thank you so much for being with us. I will add that probably above all, I would like to say you are just a great person, a great alum, a very generous person. So I think I would put that at the top of your list. So thank you. We're really happy and lucky to have you as an alum representing our college.
Oh, thank you, Pam. This has been such a surreal week. As she mentioned, this is my book, baby, Impact. It launched on Tuesday, and it is such a surreal moment to be here, kind of bringing things full circle and getting to talk with my alma mater and fellow alumni. So thank you, all 71 of you, for being here. I'm really thrilled to spend the next hour with you. So I'm gonna bring up some slides. Whoops, sorry, wrong button. As you can see, I'm just getting the hang of this. So in a normal times, I would be speaking to you perhaps in person, which is always the most enjoyable, to be able to see your faces and your reactions. I'm sure many of you have hosted webinars during this year, and it is so incredibly awkward to be just staring into a camera, into this void. But I know you're out there, and that's why my one request today is, if you are able to, I would love and encourage you to use our chat. I think this is not only a way that I'll soak up your energy and it will help me, but also I think there's so much value in all 73 of you getting to know who else is on the call. So I assure you, it will not distract me if you're chatting all the time. On topic, off topic, I'd really love for you just to share who you are, and maybe what you do to make an impact in the world. It won't distract me. If you do have questions for me, though, use that Q&A box, the bubble, because then I'll look at that at the end. And throughout the presentation, I have moments where I will be looking for your feedback and for what you have to say. For starters, I thought it would be nice if we all got a sense of who is here on the call. So I've asked Pam to push a poll forward and let us know how you identify. Pam, is it popping up on your screen? Oh, there we go. So are you an active student? Are you a senior, an alum, faculty, staff, or friend of TCNJ? Just the first question.
I was hoping,
one
yes,
here.
I was hoping only the first one would come up, but I couldn't figure out how to do that.
That's okay.
I can send the second question again later in the presentation.
Okay, so whenever the responses are in, you can show us who we have here.
People are still answering. I'll let it level out here a little bit.
All right, so mostly alum, which is great. Thank you to the Office of Alumni Engagement for hosting us. I'm glad to see that. I'm also happy that there's 9 students on the call. So I especially encourage those students to tell us about yourselves and what you're studying so that hopefully you can find some mentors among the alumni. And thank you to the faculty and staff who are here, and for the 2 friends of TCNJ, one of which I think is my mom, so shout out to her. Okay, so we'll close this poll. And here's just what we're gonna cover in the next hour together. I'm gonna start out by sharing my story with you, and then pulling from the themes in the book Impact, I'll address some common traps that I think we all fall into when trying to make an impact. I'll share some practical tips to unlock our potential to do something that matters, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A. So starting with my story. For the past 17 years, I have known beyond the shadow of a doubt why I'm here on this planet. And I felt so clear about the change that I want to create in the world. But it hasn't always been this way, especially when I was a teenager. I had no idea. And I'll explain more about that in a minute. But just to kind of echo what Pam said in her introduction, currently I'm the co-founder and CEO of She's the First, a nonprofit that I founded 11 years ago. And our mission is fighting for a world where every girl can choose her own future. Our model is to team up with local grassroots organizations worldwide, specifically in 11 different countries in East and West Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. And we work with those programs to make sure girls are educated, respected, and heard. Our funding is directly impacting about 12,000 girls. And a large part of our programming is also training the educators and mentors who work with girls so that they're designing stronger programs that yield better outcomes. And this year in particular, we've been working with those organizations on pivoting and adapting their curriculum, which was on paper essentially in a classroom, to try to help girls continue learning remotely, as is happening in the US, but is much more challenging when the girls we serve just didn't have tablets and computers at home. So it's been a tough year for girls' education, but I'm really proud of how She's the First has kept on fighting. And one of the reasons we have stayed afloat is because we have this incredible grassroots community behind She's the First. I do have a handful of major donors and corporate sponsors, but by and large, it is individuals who for a decade have been giving $20 here, $100 there, who have monthly giving accounts. And one of the signature pieces of She's the First has always been students who use their voices. And I would say now we're very multi-generational in our support base, but when we started out, I was 23. So I naturally knew a lot of students who were still in college. And today we have a couple hundred campus chapters at high schools, colleges, and universities. And TCNJ has had a chapter since the very early days of She's the First, naturally. This is one of the e-boards from the past few years. And they do all sorts of fundraisers. So those of faculty on campus have probably stumbled upon one of their epic Bake a Change sales. But what you might not see is that when these students at TCNJ and the other schools, when they have their meetings, they are actually leading conversations. They're watching documentaries. They're talking about how to have an intersectional feminist approach to the way that they create a change, starting in their own local community, but also rippling out to their global communities as well. And these are the young people who I secretly wish that I could be when I was their age, especially when I was in high school. So to give you some more background on me, I am proudly from New Jersey, South Brunswick, New Jersey, Central Jersey, which, fellow alum, you may have debated in the dorms freshman year whether there was such a thing. And you can validate me in the chat, please. Central Jersey does exist. And I grew up with my parents, Cheryl, who's on the call, Scott, my dad, and my younger sister, Shelly. And I was surrounded by love, by books. We would go to the library like every week and bring home stacks of books since a very young age. Neither of my parents went to college, but in raising Shelly and I, they always talked about us doing that after we graduated from high school. It was never a doubt. Like, I thought that was just the normal path in life. You go to college. But what I was told is that you have to study really hard, get straight A's in order to be accepted and hopefully get scholarships. So I loved learning. I was very studious from a young age. This is little first grade Tammy. I still pose like that sometimes. I think this little Tammy had a lot of spunk, and I enjoy, reading her little diary entries that I find in my childhood bedroom. But as little Tammy got older, a tween, in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, middle school, that confidence and that sparkle kind of started to fade. And I became extremely shy. Looking back, I asked myself, why is that? When I was surrounded by so much support and love, both my parents and going to good public high school, great teachers. And I really think it's because our society, so I'm one of the privileged ones of growing up in that supported bubble. But even so, our society, our culture, the media sends messages to young women and puts these pressures and ideas of what they should look like, or what it means to be cool. And I never felt like I was cool. So I was very quiet. I hated public speaking. Classroom participation I was a straight A student, and that was the hardest thing for me, to raise my hand and participate. It got so bad up to the point of when I was 17 years old, the tradition for the graduating class, the senior class, there was the superlatives in the yearbook. And I'd love to hear in the chat. I'm bringing up the chat box a little bit. I don't know, can you see that on the screen? I'm not sure, I don't want to distract you, but yes, so please tell us in the chat if you had this tradition at your high school as well, where, most likely to succeed, best dressed, best smile, most likely to be president. And I was voted one of these things, and this was my title, shyest. And this was such just like one of those moments that, and I think there are multiple moments like this in our lives that split it into a before and an after. Like, you're not the same person after this happens. And this was just the moment that it occurred to me, like, oh my gosh, I can't keep going through the rest of my life with this kind of reputation, that people think that I'm just so meek and I'm so scared of the judgment that other people have of me. I remember when this photo was taken, there was this like pillar in the lobby of the high school, and they were like, hide behind that, like you're scared of people. And I went along with it. You can see the guy who was shyest did not. He was also voted most athletic, so he showed up for that picture. I showed up for this photo shoot and I told myself, you're gonna make this the most ironic moment of your life because you're not gonna go through life being shy. And at that point, I was accepted to the College of New Jersey. I knew that's where I would be going for my freshman year. And I knew I'd be in a new environment where no one would know this about me. They wouldn't know that I was the girl who didn't raise her hand and was so quiet. So I really credit TCNJ with giving me that environment and that space to become the young woman I wanted to be. And I didn't fully know what I wanted to be, but I recognized that and nor did I even understand the extent of privilege the way I do today. The conversations that young people are having today about white privilege, white supremacy, institutionalized racism, like all of that, that was not part of the dialogue and the conversation that I was exposed to. I mean, there wasn't social media at the time. It wasn't part of the classroom conversations. So I became aware of the privilege that I had later on. But from a global perspective, I did recognize that as an American woman, I had freedoms that women and girls around the world did not. I knew that education wasn't a right that every girl had. I knew that there were women around the world couldn't share their thoughts and speak up freely without punishment. And it occurred to me like what a waste that I had those freedoms and the safety to express myself and that I wasn't using it. So I came to TCNJ as a journalism major with the intent that I would tell the stories of girls and women who were making a difference in their communities. So what I knew at that age was that, one moment to get my screen, there we go. I knew that there was this North Star, which we talk about in the book, that this guiding light for me was seeing a world where girls and women would have the opportunities and resources to pursue their dreams. I did end up also getting scholarships to come to TCNJ, and that just further instilled in me, on top of like the values that my parents gave me, this desire to pay it forward. So that guided me through the first chapter of my career, which after I graduated, I did land a dream job working in the magazine publishing industry for the 17 magazine and their brands, which reach young women. And ironically, again, I ended up being the first social media editor of 17, which is a magazine I did not read as a teenager because, as I told you, I didn't identify as someone who was cool enough to pick up that magazine or stylish enough. But in my 20s, I started to realize that media had this power to send empowering messages to young women, and I wanted to be part of that aspect of it. So as the first social media editor, I was running the Twitter and the Facebook for the brand. I was the voice of the brand, and that was just one of the coolest experiences ever, which kind of started to, in my head, I was still becoming more curious and passionate about these global issues that girls were facing. It was just, there was a little like hum of awareness that I think people today now know at great scale how 130 million girls are uneducated around the world. Figureheads like Malala have brought or Michelle Obama have brought so much awareness of this issue to the mainstream culture. But back in 2009, it wasn't really talked about. So I actually stumbled onto those facts through my senior year journalism project with Professor Kim Pearson. And outside of work, I was doing some volunteer work and continued to read articles about it. But then at work, my skill sets were really about social media. And that kind of came together in my head into this idea of launching She's the First as a social media campaign. I thought, I'll put up a YouTube video, and we had Twitter and Facebook at the time, and I'll spread awareness of why it's important to support girls. And when they're the first in their family to graduate from high school, they're then in a position to break the cycle of poverty in their family and lift up their communities. I call this humble beginnings because I mean, the video, when I look at it now on YouTube, it makes me cringe. But it was a start. I was proud of it then. We've come a long way since. But this is really, I share this story even though like now I'm a little embarrassed about the quality of the video, because I want you to know that when you have an idea, sometimes you just have to do it and take the first step. And of course, know that you're going to get better and put out greater work and build a community as you go along. It always starts with just taking that first step. And this was the first step for me. And I worked with my co-author, co-founder, Kristen Brandt on it. I was 23 years old. And when we put this out into the world, I fully intended to keep my job in magazines and just do this on the side. But it ended up taking on a life of its own over the next 3 years. And by 2012, I quit my job to run it full time, which is a whole other story that I'm going to save for later and tell you about soon. But right now, I'm just going to take down my slides. Let me find my cursor so you can see me a little better. Oh dear. Okay, here we go. Give me a moment. Here we go. Okay. So actually, I had another slide. Hold on. You, as I am a new author, you are getting this presentation for the first time. So I'm still working on my coordination here.
No one is a Zoom expert yet, myself included.
Okay, here we go. So these are some questions that I'm going to pose to you for comments or affirmation in the chat. I would love to know how many of you feel like me, your career path wasn't a linear journey either. As I started in journalism and now find myself an author and nonprofit executive. Or how many of you have ever wanted to find fulfillment beyond your job or beyond your home? I'm gonna bring up the chat so I can watch you respond to that. Yep. Hi, Rosie. Yep. Erica, Angela. So a lot of you, hi, Professor Pearson, can relate to this. And I certainly do as well. You know, I'm someone who works full time in professionally making an impact. And most of my work with She's the First, it is global. So I was, and I write about this in the book, I was feeling this itch to do more in my local community, in the US, in the New York City area. So I myself am always thinking about how can I do more? It's actually what led me to take the amazing opportunity to become a trustee. And you know, as I speak to you today, I am working on the assumption that you are all already doing something that matters. I know you are. I think we're a bunch of overachievers who want to do more. And that's kind of what I present, you know, the following bit tips and tricks that I have is with that in mind. And as you'll read in the book, the reason I think we show up for a talk called Do Something That Matters is because we all care about our dash. And these are words that I borrow from a poem I once read, where the poet talked about the dash as being what is between the day that you were born and the day that you're going to die. And that's a morbid thought, but it's also reality. And I think when we think about what is that dash going to represent, what kind of legacy are you leaving on the world, that's where we get that fire to want to do more and to leave the world better off than we found it. And of course, in the comments, I see someone already left us. I was going to ask Marcia, thank you. She helped to get Biden elected. I would love for you to share with others, when was the time this year that you felt urged to do something or what you did? This has been an extremely difficult year where the systems that we already knew were broken have just further crumbled beneath us, and the inequalities and the injustices that exist in our society have, there's just no hiding from them. A global pandemic really brought that out, a divisive presidential election. While Biden and Harris did win, thank goodness, it was by such a small margin that we clearly have a lot of work to do. And I think it's very easy for us to think that those problems are so big that we can't make it better. But I hope you, like me, are feeling hope going into the new year, because we saw how all those small actions that people did during the election season actually mattered. I know that I felt like the tiniest little drop in the bucket when I was phone banking and, got everyone's voicemail except for that one person who picked up in Georgia, and I got to talk to them, or sending out letters. It can feel like it doesn't make a difference, but then there are these moments in life, like we had a couple weeks ago, where you feel it and you know that you're not in this alone, and that everyone has a piece of the puzzle. And when we all show up and we all play our part, that's when change really happens. Okay, so let me tell you more about why I decided to, on top of my very busy day job, to write a book. I wrote this book first and foremost for others, because I was frequently asked over the last decade for, will you speak to my niece about how to start a nonprofit, or I want to volunteer or give back and I don't know where to begin. And first, I couldn't possibly find the time to help everyone one-on-one, but also I wasn't really qualified to do so, because I can't answer that question in one way for everyone. Everyone has their own personalized, unique answer to how they should contribute based on what they're most passionate about, what skills and gifts and talents they have to offer. And it's really easy to burn out when you're firing on all cylinders and trying to do too much. Change making is a skill that you practice over a lifetime. And I wrote this book from a place of expertise in leading change organizationally through a global girls' rights nonprofit. But as I mentioned, I'm pushing myself into new spaces to make a difference. For example, becoming a trustee at TCNJ, that's a completely new ball game for me, where I have to do a lot of listening and figure out how do I fit in an effective way. So even as someone who's been doing this work in another context for a while, I turn to my own book for guidance. And in the next few slides, I would love to share kind of the highlights and the key takeaways from Impact with you. Hold on. Looking for my cursor again. I'm on two screens. I wonder if any of you have a similar setup. You know what it's like. I'm trying to get back to my Zoom screen here.
I only have one and it gives me enough problems.
Okay, so here, this is what I tell myself when I'm feeling overwhelmed, like how to be reassured and ground myself so that I can move forward. And it's so easy when you're feeling overwhelmed to let these simple truths slip by. One, remember that change starts with you. It's so easy to look at everything out in the world, that you skip over the fact that you have the ultimate influence over your everyday actions and decisions, your attitudes, at home, the decisions you make with your purchases, with how you raise your children and the conversations you have at the dinner table, at work with who you hire, and your influence over setting policies that make the workplace more inclusive and foster diversity. So in our book, we start by focusing on the individual. The second truth is to remember that you're not alone, and lasting change happens as a collective, as a community, not individually. And that always reassures me to know, okay, I've got my lane, I've got my plan of what I'm going to do, but to remember that there are others in the fight with you and fighting on other issues that intersect with yours. So it's not all on your shoulders. And then again, like reframing your thoughts to remember that you can drive progress by focusing on what you can do instead of what you can't. And I find that when I'm starting to spiral in hopelessness, it's when I let my mind focus on all the things I can't do. Once I come back to what I can do, that's when I start making things happen. So 3 steps to do something that matters. I always start, as we do in chapter 1 of Impact, with what lights you up and your North Star. As I mentioned before, what mine was, this is where you're envisioning what is that world you want to live in. And when you fill in the blank of, I want to live in a world where, that's your North Star. And what is important about so the trap that people fall into is the you shoulds. Oftentimes, you might be working on something, as I did starting out at 23, holding fundraisers for girls who didn't have an education in West Africa. And I remember people would come up to me and say, well, you should be doing this for students in the US. Or when they found out the programs were just for girls, I heard so many times, you should be doing this for the boys. You'll be glad to know I don't hear that as much these days. I think people are starting to get why it's important to focus on girls. But nevertheless, sometimes it's other people telling you what they think you should be doing, or even yourself and your own inner voice can be pushing you in too many directions, because most likely you are a very caring, kind human whose heart is breaking for so many different reasons. So the North Star is, when you choose that becomes, I think, how I kind of make peace with, this is where I'm going to contribute, and the filter through which I'm going to make decisions about how to spend my limited resources. My heart, like yours, is big and cares about a lot of issues and a lot of people. And that, honestly, you can have infinite power to love and support issues. But when it comes to your time, your money, you have a finite amount that you can give. So you've got to make some decisions. You've got to say no to some things in order to actually make a difference. So using your North Star as a filter to decide where you want to make those commitments. My tip is that when you are deciding what your North Star should be, or what it is, rather, looking within and connecting it to a personal story. Because people who have a personal connection to the change that they want to create are naturally more informed, more passionate, and can bring others along with them. So for me, I'm a first generation college graduate. I've always been drawn to education and especially higher education. And through that gendered lens, having grown up as a girl who had very low confidence. So that's where I make my decisions of where to show up is at that intersection of gender equality and education. The next step I have is to unwrap your gifts. And I take this language from a quote from a New Jersey woman that I admire, Marie Forleo. She's an author and entrepreneur, and her mantra has always been, the world needs that special gift that only you have. And I also believe that every single person has unique talents and skills that are so needed in the world and in your local community. And the trap that I see happen a lot is that people overcommit. Come on, there we go. And that's because it's far too easy to say, yes, 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 every time you're asked to do something for a worthy cause. But of course, when you overcommit, that's when you're more likely to fall short. And I think including myself, I think we can all think of a time that we overextended ourselves and then had to back out of a commitment. If you're willing to share with others to kind of make them feel less alone about that, please do. I know I signed up for more phone banking shifts during the election season than I actually could show up for, and still keep She's the First running. So I felt a little guilty about that. So I'm also always learning and reminding myself of this. Working at a nonprofit, I've been on the other side of the equation where someone volunteers and then bails on you, and then you have to do double the work to do it in half the time and find someone else. So a way to avoid this is to take stock and take inventory of literally everything you can think of that you have to offer that's of value. So if you have time, quantify it. How much time do you have? Is it on the weekends? Is it mornings? Is it seasonal? Money. How much can you set that budget in the beginning of the year of your giving portfolio? And then can you kind of think, all right, I'm going to earmark this much to causes that align with my North Star. I'm going to set aside this much for my friends' birthday fundraisers on Facebook. They don't need to align with my North Star. I just want to support my friends because I love them. I'm going to set aside this much for my alma maters because they made me who I am today. With your skills, what things do you do professionally that you get paid for, that a nonprofit, especially a smaller one, could really benefit from, but doesn't have the budget to pay? If you can summarize all of that, when you're then going to approach a nonprofit or an organization to be part of their mission, I guarantee you will knock the socks off of whoever is on the other end of that call or email, because it is so rare that people actually unwrap those gifts and clearly identify what they can give. Very often they're just from a well-intentioned place, eager to help out, and don't really put the work in unpacking. And this happens a lot. And I'm hoping that this book, for any of you who do also work in nonprofits, you can share impact with people who need some guidance going through that process and creating what I like to call an impact pitch. Fortunately, most of us are employed, right? At some point in our career, like many points probably, you pitched yourself, you applied for a job and you did exactly this. You tell an employer what you can offer and how you're going to make their company better. So I'm hoping that this book and this conversation helps people realize that same rationale should apply to when I'm looking to team up with a nonprofit, a political committee or campaign, whatever it is. The third step to do something that matters is to match that, what you have to offer, with what the world needs. The trap here, and we all fall into it, I tell a story of when I screwed up in the book, is centering your own needs and thinking about what you want to experience before thinking of what your your impact partner needs. This happens all the time. I get emails. I got an email just a couple weeks ago at She's the First from a woman who asked if she could have a Zoom call with the founders of the organization because she said she loved the organization very much, but she wants to speak about it from a place of love, and she wants to get some details verbally, not via email because it's impersonal. So, I mean, it's expensive to take the founders of an organization away, for one person who's thinking about a small donation, right? Because that's why we put all our time into putting this on the website and doing interviews and videos that are out there in the public to learn more about why we care and what we do. And this woman, I mean, sweet woman, right? Like, she had good intentions. She wanted to be part of the work. But she didn't show any evidence of having put in work herself first. And she was telling the organization how she wanted to be communicated with. So instead, a tip to avoid that is to, as I mentioned, create that impact pitch where you can proactively present an organization with identifying, like, I am also passionate about creating XYZ change. This is my North Star. This is what I concretely can offer. I would love to hear how this meets your needs. And when you send those kind of messages, I can tell you, as a small nonprofit, we are going to be far more likely, we'll get back to you very quickly if we have a match. And if we don't, we'll tell you that. And then you can move along to the next prospective partner. So that is a way to really accelerate when you want to be doing something maybe new to make a difference. So these are very practical skills that I've seen work time and again. And I love reminding people that these are steps that they can take, because I think it really is a self-discovery process of doing something that matters. Doesn't have a one-size-fits-all answer. The answers are inside of you already, and it's just a matter of creating conversations, giving people the tools and the tips to discover it for themselves. Again, going back to our lively chat, which I appreciate, I would encourage you to share ways that maybe you've been thinking about how you can level up your impact, or things that you're already doing. To give you some ideas, maybe I'm sure many of you are already loyal donors to several causes. One way you can level up your impact there is to become a monthly donor. You can give less each month, but for an organization to know that they can count on that support into the future maximizes your impact. If you are a devoted volunteer, maybe it's time to think about, can you upgrade to a leadership role? Can you take on chairing a committee or being an advisor or a board member? If you're hiring, can you go that extra step to check in with your company's HR team and make sure that they are recruiting a diverse pool of applicants? I hope your workplace is having conversations about anti-racism and anti-oppression, but if they're not, well, you can be the one who suggests, like, why don't we bring in a facilitator? Why don't we all, read Me and White Supremacy or another book and have a conversation about it as a staff? If you show up to vote in every election, I hope you do, can you help the campaigns that you support to get more votes? There are endless possibilities, and if you kind of share some of your personal ideas, if you're comfortable doing so, I'm sure that you will inspire one another and me. So as we wrap up, and I want to leave time for Q&A, I promised you that I would share, I think at this point I can, whoops, I'll stop sharing, that I would share a story kind of telling you how I got from running this social media campaign turned organization. Like I was doing it all as a volunteer while working in the magazine industry. How did I make the leap? Well, I credit this volunteer I had who took one small step and one small action that became a huge catalyst. So back in March 2012, I was a candle burning on both ends. I was waking up at 6 a.m., working on She's the First stuff until like 9 or 10 a.m. when I clocked in at 17. Then I get home around 7 p.m., work till midnight. It was just constant and it was not sustainable. I mean, I was young, I had lots of energy, but I could not keep doing two demanding full-time jobs, one that paid my bills and one that didn't. I also didn't have the funds to just quit my job and start working for She's the First full-time. So we would do fundraisers around that era of She's the First to raise money for the programs for girls worldwide. And one of the events we did was a benefit concert, and I had a volunteer team who helped me pull that off. And one of the volunteers, her name is Stephanie. I was offered tickets to this women's conference called Women in the World. Maybe some of you have been there. It was like this really fancy thing at Lincoln Center, Tina Brown hosted, and expensive tickets, but we got some free ones as an organization. But I couldn't go because I had to go to my office job. So I offered it to the volunteers, and Stephanie took me up on it and said, yeah, I'll go. So she went to this event, loved it. I mean, they had Gloria Steinem, Hillary Clinton, like they had top feminist leaders and speakers. And I remember the way she told me the story. It was a rainy day. And as the event was ending, she went out with all these women to the street. I think it was probably before there was Uber. And the line for the cabs was quite long on this rainy day. So women ended up sharing cabs with one another. And Stephanie ended up in a cab with a woman who she struck up a conversation about, how do you find yourself here at the event? And Stephanie said, I'm a volunteer for She's the First, and we support girls to be first in their families to graduate and blah, blah, blah. And the woman said, wow, that sounds like a really great cause. I'm consulting for this man who lives in New Jersey. He's very philanthropic. He has 3 daughters. He loves supporting gender equality issues and would like to do more global work. So why don't we connect him to She's the First? And Stephanie was like, yeah, that's great. Let's put him in touch with the co-founder, Tammy. So sure enough, they did. And I ended up doing my research on this man and having a meeting with him in 2012. And I knew he had capacity to give big checks with multiple zeros on them. And I had never asked someone for money before, not like thousands of dollars, $25,000 to be exact. And I was so nervous, but I took this meeting with him and I just told him from my heart why I thought She's the First had so much potential to do more if only I could focus on it full time. And he said, you know what, I'll thank you for sharing. I'm going to go home and talk to my wife and we'll let you know. And then Tom soon got back to me and said that he and his wife would love to be our first funders. And he wrote that check. He's written many checks since then. He serves on our board of directors to this day. And I mean, there are many moments that kind of, and you know this in your own life and career, many moments that bring you to where you are right at this time. But that was one that I can't imagine where I would be if there wasn't that one volunteer who was so passionate as to just share what we did in such a way that other people wanted to be part of it. And that just goes to show you that you don't need to be a founder of an organization or a CEO of one. Just by being an advocate for what you believe in with all your heart, you can never underestimate what can happen. And I told Stephanie recently, I'm sharing your story because I want people to know that doing something that matters really can be as small and simple as making an introduction and talking about what you care about. And look at how much can happen when someone does that. So yes, you can, and you already, have grand plans and are doing such big things to make a change, but never underestimate the power of those small actions and things that you can do. So as I wrap up my remarks, I will ask Pam to bring up our last poll, and then we can have some Q&A. But I'm always inspired when I leave an event. We used to do this at She's the First events in the city all the time. I'd give my talk and I would say, and then people would be overwhelmed with like wanting to get involved. And I've learned if I just reminded them doing one thing, leaving the event, leaving the Zoom, and committing to do one thing for whatever it is that you care about. I think then we can all walk away, and sleep well tonight, knowing that, yeah, we took action. We can't do everything. So give up on that now. We can't do everything, but we can all do one thing, and we can every day wake up with that same attitude and just do one thing. So Pam, if you will bring up the poll, I am going to challenge you all to do one. So question number 2, to do one thing. And maybe that is setting up a monthly donation for a cause that you already support. Maybe it is reading Impact. I would be thrilled. I know I'm biased, but I'd be thrilled if you bought Impact and actually made an impact plan for yourself to kind of sustain your change-making efforts for the long term. You could have a conversation with someone, just like Stephanie in the cab did. You can do a social media post, similar. You never know how far that's going to reach on whatever social media platforms that you're a part of. So we'll give you a moment to make your selection. And then I thought, if you all saw kind of what everybody else was doing, I know I get so much motivation from knowing that I'm not in this alone. So Pam, whenever it's ready, you can show us the world.
Sure, and you may have to answer both questions again. I apologize.
No.
In order to submit your answer.
Great. Okay. Let's, are you able to scroll it, Pam, so I can see the bottom? Maybe I have to do, I got it. Okay. Well, Impact Plan 1, I hope that's very nice. I probably did bias your response a little bit, but maybe not. I would be thrilled if you got the book. And I'm so excited to see that the nonprofits and the causes that you support are going to get some extra love. So with that, I am going to ask Pam to save the chat so I can read it later. But we'll focus on maybe a couple fast Q&A questions. But I know we're short on time, so I also want to encourage you, if you want to reach out to me, I'll put it in the chat myself. My handle on Instagram, where I'm very active, is just my name. And then my email is tammy@shesthefirst.org. If you have any questions that come up after, I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. But Pam, if there's 1 or 2 questions, I can answer those quickly now.
There are, and before we wrap up, I did want to correct, I misspoke in the beginning. You are an alum of the School of Arts and Comm as a journalism major, and I believe I said School of Business, which I'm sure you have supported and are happy to support, but I want to make sure I correct myself that you are a journalism major.
Yes, I'm sure for Professor Pearson's sake, I represent them.
Exactly. Credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
So we do have a question. Our first question is, how are your major corporate donors? Or maybe who are your major corporate donors? Perhaps that was supposed to say.
Yep. So my biggest corporate donor is Bobby Brown, which is my biggest grant ever was this year. Thank goodness, because we really needed it during COVID. It was $300,000 from Bobby Brown. And then we've gotten American Express has supported us. Barbie actually was last year was my biggest donor. Last year was Barbie, 150,000. And these are honestly like longstanding relationships I've had with people, word of mouth. To this day, you know, I'll just share this really quick because it was like so strange. Chelsea Clinton retweeted me about the book on Tuesday, and I was like, wow. I mean, I don't have famous friends, you know, like she's the first has gone out into the world with her own reputation and just earned the admiration of really amazing people. And I'm like so humbled to be, she's the first friend and like get to bring people into this community. But I really did, like I built my network from scratch since the TCNJ days. And I think that just goes to show that, you know, you don't need to be famous or powerful. Like it really is word of mouth, and everyday people and professionals have made these huge moments and grants possible for She's the First.
That's great. Thank you. Christina asks if you have a favorite local bookstore that she can purchase your book from.
Oh, thank you for asking. Yes, Greenlight Bookstore is my local bookstore in Brooklyn. They hosted an event with me and Kristen last night. But the other option is bookshop.org is a fantastic site because all your book orders, they fulfill them through local bookstores across the country.
Okay, our next question. What does it feel like to speak on on international stages, knowing that you used to be afraid of public speaking? How did you get over that?
I'm still a little terrified. I actually, for those of you who were here at the beginning and listened to my little hype song, She's the First, I usually listen to that song before I go and do any sort of big speaking moment because I need to be reminded that those girls are inside me and with me and they're brave. So I'm going to be too. So it's not like the nervousness goes away, but I just do it anyway.
All right, if anyone else has a question, I'll just hang for a couple more seconds. I don't see any questions in the chat, but we do have a lot of great comments and great remarks on your presentation.
Oh, thank you, everyone. It really does. As I mentioned, like it's so weird not being able to see your faces and seeing your names and ones I recognize, like Rosie. It really is just so heartwarming. It makes me so happy. So thank you for showing up and for sharing your thoughts and comments.
Well, I second all of those comments. This was a very timely webinar. I think it really speaks to a lot of people right now in today's world. So thank you. Thank you for being you, and thank you for being here today. And I think, like I said, a lot of us got a lot out of this webinar.
Oh, my pleasure. I wouldn't be here today without TCNJ. So I am so, so proud to be an alum, as you can see by the lion,
Great.
the lion in my backdrop.
Well, thank you again, Tammy, and everyone in our audience. Thank you. We will pick up our industry insiders again in the new year. So stay tuned for emails and our social media posts about that. And everyone, until then, stay safe. Happy Thanksgiving and enjoy the holiday season as much as possible.
Yeah, be well. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Tammy.